ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 26, the fundamental principles of material nature. Yeah, so we have covered 3 pages now. So we are at text 23. I'll just read through the translation. Text 19. After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates the material nature with his internal potency, the material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in the material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport is describing what is Pradhana, and Srila Prabhupada quotes Vishnu Puran, how the living entities belong to spiritual nature, but they come to the material nature and they have different destinations, right? And Prabhupada says there are some exceptions, like Brahma or others. And later, generally it is expected that father gives life to the child, but the mother gives the body. And similarly, the father here is the Supreme Lord, from whom the Aham Bija Pradapita, the seed is coming, and the material nature is providing the body. Okay, very beautiful analogy of father and mother here. Right. So, the last paragraph. The theory that the symptoms of life are manifest by the iterations of the 24 material elements is not supported herein. So this is directly describing about Darwin's futility, that spirit cannot come from matter. Consciousness cannot be generated by the combination of material elements. You can call them by different fancy names, amino acids, this and that. But the consciousness is distinctly different than matter. It is spiritual. The living forces come directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is completely spiritual. Therefore, no material scientific advancement can produce life. The living force comes from the spiritual world and has nothing to do with the interactions of the modes of material nature. So, this is very important, that sometimes people may argue about the test tube baby and everything, but it is, you are just taking something living and artificially simulating the environment which is similar to the womb environment, which was done by Vedvyasji originally when Gandhari struck her embryo, struck her womb. When she heard the news that, so what happened was Kunti and Gandhari, they were pregnant at the same time. And Pandu had renounced the kingdom. He had gone to the forest. And Dhritarashtra had become the Karyakari Samrat. He was not the king, was coronated. He was temporary king. So that, the real king comes and takes. And the situation was such that anybody who gives first birth, either Kunti or Gandhari, will have a natural claim over the throne. And they were pregnant at the same time. And then the pregnancy of Gandhari was prolonged for the unnatural period. And then what happened is, and then in the meantime, there was a birth of Yudhishthir was born. And when the news reached to Gandhari that, Kunti has given birth to Yudhishthir, she became so angry and envious and frustrated that she just began to beat her womb in such a way that the entire the pregnancy, there was a kind of a forced abortion, and the entire fluid was just, but the dasis, they preserved that fluid, and later it was coming to this point. Later it was by mercy of Vedavyas and by the expertise of Vedavyas, he divided that into 100 pots and simulated the conditions of 100 pots, which people laughed. That Gandhari giving birth to 100. Just 50 years back, this was a laughing stuff. People used to laugh this mythology, calling it mythology. Now what we call it as test tube baby. So it was just and it is just an environment simulation. But Prabhupada says here very clearly that by however a material scientific advancement, we can never produce life, because life comes from life. If you remember in our morning readings, we have already read this book, Life Comes from Life. Text 20. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahatattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestation and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. Okay. So after manifesting the variegatedness is manifested. The effulgent Mahat Tattva, which is containing all the universes within itself. So there was a question whether this is happening inside the universe or outside the universe. So this is happening outside the universe because it is containing all the universes within itself. And this Mahat Tattva, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, right? This is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation. So when there is bhutva praliyate, when there is a cosmic, entire pralaya, mahapralaya, but this Mahatattva is not destroyed. What this does, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, the Satchidananda. But when the Mahatattva is created, it manifested the material ego and swallowed up the darkness which was covering the cosmic universe. Next important line. This idea can further be explained. A person at night remains inactive, covered by the darkness of night. But when he is awakened in the morning, the covering of the night or the forgetfulness in the sleeping state disappears. Right? So when somebody is sleeping, one may assume foreign identity in the form of dreams. One may become king in the dream, one may become butterfly in the dream, But when one gets up, and that is the period of apohanam cha, or this is the period of forgetfulness. But when gets up, the sleeping state disappears. Similarly, when the Mahat Tattva appears after the night of dissolution, the effulgence is manifested to exhibit variegatedness of the material world. Right. Next, text 21. The mode of goodness, which is clear, sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called as Vasudeva, or consciousness, becomes manifest in the Mahat Tattva. So now there is manifestation of mode of goodness. The mode of goodness is called as Vasudeva. So Vasudevasya. Okay, so what the Chittam. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that Vasudeva manifestation is the Shuddha Chitta is called as Shuddha Sattva, and it is the Shuddha Sattva is the ideal where there is manifestation of the Supreme Lord, and this has no tinges of the passion and ignorance. Therefore, it is called as unalloyed goodness. Alloy means when we mix something. So this goodness is called as unalloyed goodness. And later, Prabhupada says this Vasudeva stage is free from the material desires. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, na sochati na kankshati. Prabhupada quotes there. Na sochati na kankshati. So Prabhupada says here, Bhagavad Gita has. And then Prabhupada explains about Vasudev's status is also explained in Bhagavad Gita as Kshetrajna, knower of all fields of activities. So he is the Kshetrajna. And finally, little late in the purport, when Krishna or Vishnu is alone, without accompaniment of his internal energy, he is called Vasudev. When he is accompanied by his internal energy, he is called as Dwarkadish. Okay. So internal energy is Radharani or Rukmini Devi, Sita Mata, Lakshmi. So these are the internal energies of the Supreme Lord. And to have a clear consciousness, Prabhupada says here, one has to worship Vasudev. And what to speak of when we worship Vasudev along with internal energy by chanting the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then the purification is really very fast. Right. So whatever we are learning is extremely scientific. And Prabhupada says this kind of personality is very, very rare. Bahunam janmanamante jnanamam mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. Durlabh is rare. Sudurlabha is extremely rare. The last paragraph of this purport, Prabhupada says, one who is actually a worshipper of Lord Shiva as a devotee of Sankarshan can be released from the false ego. If one wants to get out of the material disturbance, one has to worship Aniruddha. So sometimes there is mention of the demigod worship and especially worshipping Lord Shiva. But if you worship Lord Shiva as a worshipper of the Supreme Lord, as a Vaishnava, then actually you are doing the Vaishnava Seva. And then one can have the benefits of liberation. Because Lord himself is a great Vaishnava, Vaishnavanam Yathasam Shambho. And if one wants to get free from the mental disturbances, one can worship Aniruddha. And for this purpose, moon planet is also recommended. Okay. So Sankarshana is represented by Lord Shiva. Aniruddha is represented by the moon planet. And this is how Prabhupada says. The next is, similarly, to be fixed in one's intelligence, one can worship the Pradyumna. And that is the worship of Brahmaji. And these matters will be further explained later. So this is text 22. Text 21. Text 22. After the manifestation of the Mahatattva, these features appear simultaneously. As water in its natural state, before coming in contact with the earth, is clear, sweet, and unruffled. So the characteristic trait of a pure consciousness are complete with serenity, clarity, and freedom from distraction. Okay, serenity, clarity, and freedom from distraction. So this is how the originally living entity is. And then he is contaminated by the material atmosphere. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, actually, it is the pure consciousness one can perceive the slight reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when the consciousness is perturbed by the Shadripus, then the reflection of the Lord will disappear and one will see some distorted Maya there. Last line. One can see the reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and one can see his own existence as well. This state of consciousness is very pleasing, transparent, and sober. In the beginning, consciousness is pure. Right. So this is very important. And this is also true to connecting this to previous purport. This is also true to when we get up in the morning. When we get up in the morning, consciousness is clear. And there are many neuroscience studies about importance of early morning activities and what the first thing that we do in the morning. The first thing that we do in the morning, if we start wasting our time on some watching the status or something like that, because this is how the the scientific labs at WhatsApp and social media, they are designed to make us addicted at the right time. And the right time is what we do early in the morning, the first thing. And because the consciousness is much clearer in the morning because of the night's rest. And that is why the Brahma Muhurta is there, where one can chant the holy names and purify one's consciousness. Or the athletes and trainers, they will train way early in the morning. The students will study early in the morning because that is the importance of early in the morning. Now we come to text 23 and 24. Mahattattvad vikurvanat Bhagavat Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Ahankaras Trividaha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Tejasascha Tamasascha Yato Bhavah Manasendriyanam Cha Bhutanam Mahatamapi. Translation.
The material ego springs up from the Mahat Tattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, and the organs of action and the gross elements evolve. Purport. In the beginning, from clear consciousness or the pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. This is called false ego or identification of the body as the self. The living entity exists in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, but he has marginal independence and this allows him to forget Krishna. Originally, pure consciousness exists, but because of misuse of marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. This is exhibited in actual life. There are many instances in which some acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. Someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. In the Upanishads, it is stated, therefore, that the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with a sharp razor very nicely. But as soon as his attention is diverted from the activity, he immediately cuts his cheeks because he mishandles the razor. Not only must one come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, but one must also be very careful. In any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there is always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. False ego is the basic principle for all material activities which are executed in the mode of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reaction. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind. And from this material mind, the senses and material organs become manifest. Hare Krishna.
So very deep translation also and purport also. The material ego springs up from Mahat Tattva. So we have seen till now Mahat Tattva. The material ego springs up from Mahat Tattva, which is evolved from Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with the active power of three kinds: goodness, passion, and ignorance. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, senses of perception, and the organs of action, and thus the gross element evolve. So, from the pure consciousness, there is evolution of guna, and to act on the guna, there is evolution of the upakarana, right? The avayava, like the organs of the action, so on and so forth. So, all this is happening from pure consciousness. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, in the beginning, from clear consciousness or pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination springs up, and that is called as false ego. And what is that false ego? False ego means identification of the body as the self. I am something other than the real identity. Okay, that is called as the springing up of a false ego. So Prabhupada says the living entity is actually spiritual in nature, very pure, but there is still he has the minute independence and misuse. Why the independence is given? Independence is given because of because the Lord loves the living entity, right? The mother loves the child and gives, take beta, take this 20 rupees. Now the child has a choice whether that 20 rupees, he buys a good pen to write the exam or buys a cigarette and smoke the cigarette, right? But the independence to the living entity is actually symptom of the Lord's love to the living entity. Correct. Because love means independence. It is not some modern movie that, tu ha kar ya na kar, and, I will just shoot down, something like that. No. The Supreme Lord, he's already so capable. He can make, sometimes people have this idea why the Lord is, why there is a desire to be against the Lord. That is because the Lord loves the living entity. And this love is exhibited by the independence. But when the living entity misuses the independence, he forgets Krishna. Krishna bhuliya jiv. And as soon as Krishna bhuliya jiv, what happens? The living entity, then he needs identity. You have to have some identity. Consciously or subconsciously, you have to have some identity. Because you give up your pure identity as I am Krishna Das, then you acquire some identity. And when you acquire some identity, you begin to behave in that identity. This happens simply, helplessly, and hopelessly. This happens. Right? Originally, the pure Krishna consciousness exists. But because of the misuse of the marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. And then Prabhupada says, this we can see in actual life as well. There are many instances when someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. Now, Prabhupada is writing the purports. And why Prabhupada's purports are so effective and so powerful? Because they are written when Srila Prabhupada is directly preaching. And there is, when Srila Prabhupada is writing this purport, suddenly one devotee, out of nothing, such amazing devotee, gave up Krishna consciousness. And, he just gave up chanting Hare Krishna, and His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj writes about this. He said that we were so shocked how someone can give the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how someone can give chanting of Hare Krishna, someone can give up prasad and everything. And he said that we all came to Prabhupada, devotees all went to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, they said that, Prabhupada, how can he give up Krishna consciousness? And Prabhupada was very composed. And Prabhupada said, don't be surprised who gives up. Be surprised who stays back. Prabhupada's, the very amazing response. Don't be surprised who gives up. Be surprised who stays back. So Prabhupada says, there are many instances in which someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. And therefore, when you come across a news like that, of course it is a very disturbing news, but it should not shake one's faith in Krishna consciousness. This is very important because whenever there is Prabhupada's another analogy, whenever there is a war, the war will always have casualty. War will always have, the deaths. Like just now, America has bombed Iran, and it will have casualties. So Prabhupada says Krishna consciousness means is a war against Maya. And we are having a war against Maya, and Prabhupada writes further here. In the Upanishads, it is stated, therefore, the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. So, what is that example? Shulasya dhara kavayo vadanti. Shulasya dhara. Shula means one is walking on the sharp razor edge. Shulasya dhara kavayo durgam patastat. The path is difficult and dhara is a shulasya dhara. It is like, driving in some Kedarnath or Badrinath trail that, one slip, your vehicle just moves 1 centimeter off the track, and there is, something like 1,000, 2,000 feet, a kind of a high is waiting for the entire vehicle to be fallen. So Prabhupada says here, the example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with sharp razor very nicely, but as soon as his attention is diverted from activity, he immediately cuts his cheek, and because he mishandles the razor, shulasya dhara. So Prabhupada says that whenever you are shaving in the morning, and whenever there is a slight diverse, you put either more force or slightly it goes, and instantly you realize I made a mistake, and then there will be blood. Why? Because, and Prabhupada says this is how the spiritual path is. Not only one must come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness by Sarvopadhi Vinirmuktam, one must always be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. Okay, so this is why we should read Srila Prabhupada books. So this is amazing thing about Prabhupada purports is generally purports, whenever you see the Acharya's purport also, Acharya purports are more about the rasa grahana of the particular text. But it is Srila Prabhupada's purport, because what is the understanding is one will receive the personal instructions from one's guru and one will relish the shastra from the commentary of the Acharya. That is the idea. Right. One will receive the personal instruction from guru and one will relish the commentary from the Acharya's writing. But Srila Prabhupada, he knew that Kali Yuga is coming and it's very difficult. People will, receive the instruction from Guru and will go to Acharya. So Prabhupada combined instructions within the purport. And this is the uniqueness of Srila Prabhupada's purport. That, there will be instructions within the purport. So Prabhupada says here, not only one come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, but one must also be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of the misuse of independence. That's what we say that, what is the 11th offense? 11th offense is to be inattentive while chanting. Of course, it may sound that, I'm talking some big things, but I need to improve my own chanting, my own, the attentiveness and carefulness in spiritual life. Nonetheless, we are discussing this, we have to discuss. So, how we chant, including I myself, how I am chanting my rounds, what I am doing early in the morning, okay, whenever I get up immediately. So all these things are creating a lasting impression and somewhere they will resurface. So the inattentiveness and carelessness, Prabhupada says, may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. And the first identity of false ego is I am this body. And then I am this body comes to the next. Sometimes one may feel I am, something. I am Rajput. I am 96 Maratha. I am Brahmin. Some identity will come in different forms. And one can actually, if one is little bit in the mode of goodness, of course, we respect Rajputs, we respect 96 Marathas, and everybody we respect. But the point is that when a devotee takes on this identity, he will become disturbed in the society based on one's identity. If to the degree we are in the mode of goodness, we can realize this. We become disturbed by the activities based on the identity that we carry the most. Right? This is very important. And that's why, if you see how scientific our whole process is, and that's why the first definition of bhakti is, the first thing in the bhakti is, Sarva Upadhi Vinirmuktam, Tat Paratvena Nirmalam, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam, Bhakti Ruchyate. So the first thing is, one has to have a right identification. Even the modern science talks about this, that that if you want to change your life, if you want to change a situation, if you want to do really well in exam, you want to do really well in your occupation, so first you have to establish yourself in a right identity first. And based on the right identity, based on the right mindset, then you have to begin your day. And there are books and books written on this peak performance. There is a book on cybernetics, and there are big authors who have written on this, and they have attained the result and written, not that some mental fantasy they have written. These are all Olympic medal, gold medalists, and those kind of people. So but the identity drives the behavior. This is very important. Identity drives the behavior. And therefore, Prabhupada says further, we cannot argue about why the false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there is always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. And what is this very careful means? Very careful in very simple terms means Vaishnava etiquettes. Right, coming back to basic Vaishnava etiquettes. To the degree we follow Vaishnava etiquettes, to the degree we just do the basic things very well, chanting 16 rounds attentively, following 4 regulative principles very strictly, and following Vaishnava etiquette. Just these 3 things, right? So Prabhupada says one has to be very careful. So very careful means these 3 things: 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles, and Vaishnava etiquettes. Right. Even if one is not doing some big, huge seva, or one is not some accomplished influencer or something like that. Simply these three things. That is the meaning of being very careful. False ego is the basic principle of all material activities which are executed in the modes of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reactions. Right. So this is very important that, being Krishna conscious. Sometimes, and aptly so, sometimes we have to strike a balance. Sometimes a devotee becomes so absorbed that he's hardly worried about what is happening in politics. We say everything is Maya, Prabhuji, only Krishna. And that time we have to give the lecture that one should be politically aware, one should be spiritually absorbed, one should be socially alert. So socially aware, politically alert, and spiritually absorbed. But sometimes the political alertness becomes so much that this the whole thing of the other upadharmas may take over one's devotional service, right? And this is the deviation of pure Krishna consciousness. One has to see what one's absorption is. Is of course needless to say, one has to do very well in one's job, but what one's looking forward, what one's aspiring to, what one aspires to read for, when we are bored, where we find our shelter in. So this shows our absorption, right? And again, this is most of the things I'm talking for myself. Okay, so I need to improve myself a lot. So Prabhupada says here, as soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reactions. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind, and from this material mind, the senses and the material organs becomes manifest. So the mind, and then accordingly, one will have the material activities based on one's identification. And one classic example to summarize all this, we have already discussed that, uh, pure soul, pure soul in the sense is one who is unbiased. Simply one is purchased a ticket and went for that IPL match. And this is such a classic example, that IPL match watching. And these two friends, two devotees, they just acquired identity and they just relished the match, enjoyed happiness and distress, fought bitterly, over that whether that fellow was out or not out, and so on and so forth. And while returning back, they were just laughing at themselves, thinking that, how last 4 hours we were so deeply absorbed in material life, right? So this purport of Srila Prabhupada is a very, the iconic benchmark purport, because this comes after a very big personality during Prabhupada's time, leaving ISKCON. And whenever Prabhupada writes here, suddenly there is a news. So, Prabhupada has written with reference to that. If you read Prabhupada purports along with, uh, Srila Prabhupada Leelamrit, you will get many great references, what Srila Prabhupada is writing and how Srila Prabhupada's purport becomes so lively and directly applicable. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you.
Thank you,
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranam, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Dandapranam.